So, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning or good evening, depending upon from where you're joining. So last time we went over what blockchain is and what it means, but given that some of you may not have been there, and I think it's also good to have a refresher, given that some time has passed. Now, Jonas and I are dealing with the subject every day, and I think it's important for us to disambiguate this without assuming too much. So really, let's start with money. If you think about money, I mean, we all know how to use money, right? And when it comes to cash, the nice thing about cash is that I can go somewhere and I can spend my cash directly. And I have full ownership of the way that I spend that cash, and no one can stop a cash transaction. Now, when we think about banking transactions, internet banking transactions, or digital transactions, digital banking transactions work a bit different. So when I want to send, let's say, Jonas money, I log into the internet banking app and I send Jonas funds. I put in his account number. And we may think that we are sending that money directly, but in actual fact, that's not the case. In actual fact, when I send funds using my bank, what is happening is a message is being sent to the bank. My transaction is being sent to the bank, and they will vet it. They will approve it or they will reject it based upon their policy and based upon their risk appetite. But the thing is that that's my money, and it's perfectly fine for banks to do this. But some people have questioned whether a new type of system was needed where we had self-sovereign ownership of our digital money. And this is what Bitcoin really proposed. Bitcoin proposed for the same type of mechanism to have transactions, online transactions, digital transactions, however, without having an entity that needs to approve or has the ability to reject a transaction. And that's all what Bitcoin was about. And this is what a cryptocurrency is. Now, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, the way they achieve this is using what we call blockchain. The blockchain is the mechanism that allows us to undertake these sort of transactions without relying on a central entity like a bank. And we can use blockchain for much more than just transactions, banking transactions. We can use it to keep track of land ownership, giving individuals self-sovereign ownership of their land, where a piece of paper in a land registry cannot be used to take away land from someone just by changing a piece of paper, or a record in a database at a land registry. So this idea of decentralization, removing power from the central authority and giving the collective users authority, the community authority, where there is no single central authority, where everything is encoded into the system and no one can break the rules. So this is what blockchain really brings. And today we're going to delve a bit more into what you may have heard the term NFT, non-fungible tokens. It's become a hype over the past 6 months or so. And what these tokens are, let's forget the word NFT, let's just call them tokens. What these tokens are, a representation of ownership, where you might be able to say that you have a particular educational certificate that has been given to you by, let's say, the University of Malta. And using this blockchain mechanism, no one can take it away from you. You have self-sovereign ownership. Not even the University of Malta can take it away from you. Now, one particular thing with this type of technology is that it's open, it's transparent. Anyone can see what's going on. So someone else who you might go to get a job and they might say, let's see your certificate. If you were to give them a piece of paper, you could fraudulently create that paper. But using this open mechanism that no one can tamper with, they can verify that the data is correct on the blockchain and it was really issued by the University of Malta. And these tokens, which are called non-fungible tokens, are a special type of token. They're a type of token where your educational certificate is not directly transferable with mine. They're unique. And this is the idea behind NFTs. And NFTs can represent many things, from educational certificates to micro-credentials that we'll talk about a bit, to ownership of content that we use in education. And when we start to talk about content, we need to start considering, what does ownership really mean? What is, who has ownership of the copyright of the actual intellectual property? Who has ownership of the book? And this raises some serious legal questions. That, Jonas, would you like to comment on this?
Absolutely, Joshua, and thank you very much, first of all, for introducing the discussion and giving me the chance to briefly refer to the legal background. Though before I start with that, Joshua, while I was listening to you, because I'm not a tech-affine person, you know that by now, and you have been, of course, explaining to all of us that when people listen about the blockchain, they think of cryptocurrencies, but you said that blockchain is not really the cryptocurrencies. It is a technology that is the foundation of cryptocurrencies and that it can be used in many different ways. One of them being the NFTs, which in the educational sector is something that we will further discuss today. But just a naive question. Do I need to understand how the blockchain works in order to take part in blockchain-related applications?
So if I were to reply with a question, do you understand how email uses SMTP and TCP IP below it? No.
What is that?
Exactly. So no, we do not need to understand. Well, most people do not need to understand how blockchain works. And I think that is the big problem that educators do when they're talking about this new type of technology. They're talking about how it works. No, what does it mean to us? So do not worry if you do not understand the technology. Let's discuss how we can use the technology.
Exactly. And I was asking you because indeed, blockchain as a technology is inherently more complicated than other forms of technologies. One needs to be really, tech-affine in order to understand, especially because blockchain is not a single technology, but as far as I can understand it, a combination of several digital technologies that were put in place in order to achieve an outcome. And I think what you mean is that we better focus on the outcome, which is decentralization, right, and power to the communities. So to take it from there, decentralization and power of the communities, and you talked about the NFTs, and what makes NFTs different than other blockchain applications, especially cryptocurrencies, is the fact that they are attached, they can create uniqueness, right? For example, if I have a Bitcoin and you have a Bitcoin, it's more or less the same thing, right? Your Bitcoin is not more unique than mine. This is why people say that Bitcoin in a way can replace the so-called fiat currencies, right? If you have a euro and I have a euro, they are the same thing, and so forth and so forth. But with NFTs, indeed, the important thing to understand is that they are unique, which and this is important not only in the ecosystem of blockchain applications. This is a digital revolution, a general digital revolution, because digital assets, ever since the internet became commercialized and then it expanded in users, digital assets have been known of not being unique. I think, Joshua, correct me if I'm wrong, but whatever we do on the internet, for example, is based on digital copies, right? If I attach a PDF document, for example, and send it to you, you don't get the original PDF document, but you will get a copy of it, that it will be transferred, right?
An exact copy of it.
An exact copy of it.
Yes.
An exact copy of it. But in that sense, they are not unique, and they can be reproduced infinitely. And nobody will ever know which was the original one at the end of the day, because apart from in Web 2 applications, apart from being able to infinitely copy things, we also don't have transparency. We don't know where things stem from. We just see them online, and we assume that if they are online, it is okay, it is legal, it is okay for them to be online, right? So the nice thing about NFTs is that they come with this uniqueness. And exactly because they are unique, they pose significant questions, especially in terms of ownership. Because now that they are unique, it is important to clarify what belongs to whom. And apart from that, we need to understand that in digital applications, in digital goods in general, the field of law that has acquired huge prominence is that of copyright law. Copyright law has been super prominent because it is the basic form that creates a virtual monopoly over something that you cannot really monopolize. As I was explaining earlier, you cannot really monopolize digital files because they are infinitely reproducible and instantly reproducible. The only thing you need to do is, right-click, copy-paste, right? But that creates a problem from a legal point of view, because that means that the original author is meant to lose control. If I write a text, for example, right, and I upload it somewhere, I will lose control of it. Even if I apply DRM, Joshua, you can confirm that people can still reproduce it, which means that there is no way to set back control. But in order to empower the creator, copyright law had to be expanded. And this is why copyright law has become prominent. Now, what is the situation with NFTs? Exactly because NFTs are unique, they make this overexpansion of copyrights not so important or relevant anymore. It means that exactly because NFTs are unique and we can certify who owns what, copyright need to not be so strict and not so absolute. And another important thing to understand, because we're talking about ownership, we need to make a distinction that it sounds legal or technical, but it is very substantial. Joshua, if I create an NFT and I sell it to you and you buy the NFT, what do you really buy? You buy the unique digital copy, but only that. Copyright, which is the power to reproduce it, the power to broadcast it, the power to make money out of it, rests with me.
That's right. Now, that's when we're talking about content, but if we're talking about, let's say, a certificate, does copyright really come in? Well, if I have a certificate and it has my details on it, and it's very easy to reproduce, even something digital, something physical, still, right? It's quite easy to reproduce something like that. So it's not just about copyright either. It's also about creating fraudulent copies and altering them slightly. And how can the blockchain help in this? How can NFTs help in this? So the one nice thing about these tokens is that when you put something onto the blockchain, when you have this digital certificate or even a physical certificate, the one thing the blockchain does is it takes a unique signature of whether it's a digital object or a physical object. It has a way of coming up with a signature. It's not a real signature, right? It's code that can, if it ever sees the same object again, can say that is the same object. However, if you change one aspect to it, if you change one aspect to the certificate where you put your name instead of mine, or even you just change one letter, that signature will not match. So we have this way of checking veracity of the actual token and what it represents in the real world.
So Joshua, a naive question. Would you agree with the statement that a blockchain-based certificate is much more tamper-proof than a physical certificate?
100%. So not only can it not be taken away from you, because this is what the blockchain provides, that no one can steal it from one, no one can tamper it, it can't be lost. The blockchain is there forever. So that's great. We have user protection. We have protection on after you undertake all of this effort to become the best professional, getting your degree, that cannot be taken away from you. At the same time, we are securing the name of our educational institutions. No one can go and pretend like they've gone to the University of Malta by creating a fake diploma or certificate, because we will check on the blockchain whether it really came from the University of Malta.
And on this level, Joshua, first of all, as a practicing lawyer on my end, what you just mentioned on the tamper resistance of the blockchain certificate, you cannot imagine how complicated it is to prove before a court of law that the physical document has been tampered with. I have been litigating partially such cases as well. And it took a court, a normal court, approximately 2 years just to decide on whether one of the documents adduced or not was forged or not. The level of expertise and the level of costs that was involved in that process was immense. Special graphologists need to be employed. And because that was one of the cases that I litigated in Greece, we had to employ a special investigator from a special unit of the Greek police that was an expert on graphology in order to conduct that. The whole trial was delayed by 2 years, just in order to be able to verify the authenticity of that document.
Sure.
If the blockchain can automate and make this process happen in a jiffy, that is already a huge gain. And on the other fact that we mentioned, the fact of originality of the source, you cannot imagine how many times, even in public debates, people claim to have certificates. And it is not only people that we transact with, they might even be politicians. I can refer at a case again from my native Greece, where a member of the government cabinet was claiming to have obtained a PhD from a Hungarian university. It took several years and several journalistic investigations before this claim was rebuffed. And, that is not only a legal problem. Ambiguity as to whether our statements on whether we have credentials or not, they can become political, they can become moral, and they, of course, can become professional problems.
And then that brings the question in regards to whether our certificates and our various qualifications, whether they should be completely public, and whether that is what the blockchain needs to work, and whether all of our information needs to be public on the blockchain. And you may hear this, but it's not the case. We can develop systems in such a way that the blockchain does not reveal your public details, but it just provides a mechanism for verifying the veracity of a certificate that you might provide to your potential employer. And that's great. And we were talking around this, Jonas, you had mentioned that it's not just about the certificate, right? Currently, you go for a job or whatever it is, and you provide a list of courses that you took and a grade. And really, when you think about it, that's a very macro view. How much do we really know about the assignments that they took?
Exactly. I mean, think about it, Joshua. Sometimes I was myself in the position at some point where I had to hire research assistants at a position at the university, right? And of course, the job description has certain soft and hard skills in mind when we open up a call. When people apply for these positions, they will usually adduce their degrees, right? Let us say that I myself apply for a job, for example. I have a degree in law, right? But you cannot really tell, if you are the prospective employer of mine, you cannot really tell what exactly are the skills that I have been trained at during my studies. The only thing you see is that for 4 years, I have been studying law, and potentially that I have been studying civil law, criminal law, and so forth and so forth. In fact, we're going to spend a large part of the interview you asking me, you say here you had classes on civil law, right? But what did you actually do? And I will have to elaborate. Of course, whatever I elaborate, you cannot even double check it, right? I, for example, might tell you whatever I believe fits the job description without that necessarily being the truth. But what if our certificates were produced using the blockchain in a way that they not only monitor our, so to speak, general knowledge, but also the individual tasks that we have completed in order to gain the credits for each of our own classes. For example, when I had copyright law back in 2006, that must have been, I was assigned to give a presentation on what is an original work under copyright law. Unfortunately, I have no way to prove that nowadays. But that might be an interesting skill for somebody that would like to employ me. So what if the blockchain could make our credentials look more transparent? And that would not only benefit the person obtaining the qualification, but also will benefit potential employers.
Indeed. And that's great, because at the end of it, the student is given not just marks, but he's given this whole CV of everything that he's undertaken through his education. And this brings me then to question, what processes do we have in place in our institution to make sure that this works correctly? And how does blockchain help? And I want to take just a few minutes, Jonas, to go over this presentation where it might help to demonstrate how does blockchain really help when it comes to the processes that we have in place. So consider this scenario where you have different exams marks that our professors and our educators are inputting into a system. And we're just going to draw the process that takes place. So the exam is received by the professor or the lecturer. The lecturer marks the exam and the mark is now assigned. And what typically happens is you pass these marks onto your administrator. The administrator gets the marks, puts them into the system, and waits for approval from the lecturer saying, are these the correct marks? At least this is the way we do it at the University of Malta. The lecturer might choose that he doesn't approve the marks. There's something wrong that he noticed. And if the lecturer approves the marks eventually, then what happens is the student ends up with a certificate. Great. Now the student goes to get a job. And let's say that this student is actually an F student. So what he does is he changes his certificate. So the student has the certificate in his own hands. He has control over what he produces. And the thing is, do we want to allow such a system? That's one question. So what we want to think is, how do we create a system where we're keeping the namesake of our university, of our educational institution, but we're also guaranteeing that our student can't lose their certificate? So what we need to think about is, who are the points of trust? Who are the powers here that have certain control that might undertake some malicious activity? There might be a mistake. So we have the lecturer, we have our administrators, we have the lecturer again, and then the student. Are there any other trusted parties? There's also the people who manage the computing system, our IT services, or a company we outsource to handle it. In actual fact, they could manipulate data. If one of their friends paid them enough, they could falsely fabricate a degree or a certificate inside of the system. And if we think about it, should we have all of this power in the hands of very few? So let's go through the stakeholders and see who really needs to be there. Well, the lecturer needs to give the marks, at least for now, right? But really, a lot of this stuff that's happening in between, that's just the process. We only need the lecturer to provide the marks, and we can get rid of everything else. How? This whole process, and even the external IT provider, by using blockchain. Look at how simple now the process becomes. Less room for error as well. And this is really what the blockchain is about. Number one, we simplify the process. No room for error and guarantees. So I hope that gives you a bit of an indication of how the blockchain can help in achieving these assurances we want to provide.
Can I ask something in that level, Joshua? From your experience in education, what is one of the common complaints of students when they leave the university and they somehow need a certificate in order to prove their marks or anything?
That it takes forever to get.
It takes forever, right, to prepare it. And imagine many of them apply for grants, and deadlines are, pressing them, or they apply for PhD positions and the such. And in order to adduce this information, I mean, I have been a coordinator of a program myself. First of all, if a student that graduated 10 years ago asks me to give the full transcripts, I turn white out of fear, because I don't know who had the position before me, how good was he in filing the documents, whether I'm going to find the documents, and finally, how long that will all take before I'm able to produce a certificate. Sometimes, according to local regulations in Germany, where I used to do that, I even had to have the copy of the certificate signed from the dean that was serving as dean 10 years ago, but nowadays might no longer be a dean anymore.
Exactly.
And in many universities, I assume that also fees are being charged in order to create copies. So if I were a student, I wouldn't be happy to go back to my alma mater and ask for a certificate. But if you can put it on the blockchain the way you described, would I be able, for example, to create a credential or a copy, or to display it without even having to go back to my alma mater again?
all you would need to do is to send a link to your employer, and using that link, the employer would know that that information is correct. Why? Because it's coming from the blockchain. And that is the slight caveat, right? That we need more awareness that when information is coming from the blockchain, that it's trusted, that it is telling you this is his certificate and it's been given by the University of Malta. So we just need that step where people start to understand that this is the guarantee that the blockchain provides.
Yes, and Joshua, when you say I'm going to send a link, me, the student, the end user, so to speak, where can I see all my blockchain-related credentials and certificates?
So,
am I going to have an account of some kind, or somewhere where I just, log in and access it?
So it really depends. There's a number of options we could go down. One could be that you just have a link, and then that information that's displayed on screen is verifiable from the blockchain. And this is, as a user, just like you see that secure lock when you go to a web page, we might have a different type of indication saying this information came from the blockchain. And you'll, okay, that's great, it's trusted. So that's one option. Another option is that you would have what we call a wallet. Think about a wallet like a user account. You have your user account, and in it, you have all of your different credentials. And an employer might say, can you send me the proof of that credential? And you would just go into your wallet, find the right credential, and say, send it to his email address. And he would receive it and be able to verify it.
And again, the end user will not have to be particularly technologically advanced, right? So, I mean, the user interface and everything will probably look like something that we are familiar with, like, for example, our Google account.
That's right. I mean, currently, the state of affairs is there's a lot of tools. It's very hobbyist, hacky-ish. But that's,
can you name a few of them, Joshua, of these tools?
Yeah, so the most common wallet that we use is MetaMask. MetaMask, what it is software that you plug into your browser. And what it allows you to do is then to go to a site and say, try to get a certificate or verify a certificate or do whatever you want to do with blockchain we've been discussing. And when you use the site, it pops up your wallet without you even knowing that it's MetaMask. So there's this current single step that needs to be done where you install the software, but once it's there, it's all seamless. In future, and what browser developers are working on, Google and all the big guys are integrating this directly into the browser. So we won't even need to make that step. And furthermore, even mobile manufacturers are creating mobiles that automatically have this functionality in it.
Joshua, in order to use such applications like MetaMask, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have heard the term gas fees. Is that something that will trouble us, at least currently? Maybe in the future it might be resolved.
Yeah, so currently the way that we use these types of systems is we need to pay when we use. And that's very different when we're talking about other types of systems. Usually it's the service provider who's paying for that service. Okay, he has control and he's paying for the service. Now using the most popular types of blockchains, the most popular type for this type of use case is what is Ethereum. You need to pay to use it. This is what we call the gas fee. And right now, these gas fees are out of this world. For a single transaction, well, they used to be less than cents. For a single transaction, now they go up to $100 and $150. And there's no way we're going to use the system.
So if I want to transfer you Ethereum worth $20, how much gas fees do I need to pay, Joshua?
Somewhere between 50 to 100, right? You have to pay more than you're actually transferring. So that's
then I better send you the 20 euro bills in a postal letter, right? Via the normal post.
So that's not going to work. And the thing is, there are many different blockchains out there. And what will happen now is, just like in the beginning of the internet, when we used to have Alta Vista, now we're using Google. It didn't exist back then. We are going to see this progress, and there are alternatives. So there are alternatives that are completely free to use. Something like IOTA, you can issue transactions without paying a single cent. So without going into the depths of the different ones out there, we will eventually emerge with the best solution that the big players will adopt as the de facto standard.
So that means that universities and students will not have to pay gas fees. So the fact that they exist today does not necessarily mean that for the issues, the educational problems that we're solving using blockchain, that will not necessarily be a problem.
Definitely. And on that point, even if we were to use the types of systems that we have nowadays to verify a credential, let's say a student has a credential, the student could send his credentials to the employer and no one would have to pay gas or pay anything in that particular case. You have to pay gas when you're putting something on the blockchain. So let's say you're putting the certificate on the blockchain. So even these types of blockchains could be usable in let's say, educational certificate issuance.
Excellent. And while we were talking, Joshua, my mind slipped back to the NFTs, and I was thinking further ways in order to integrate them into the educational process. So, you know, one of the things that sometimes we might struggle as academics, right, yourself and myself, is keeping our students motivated throughout the semester. Especially semester-long classes, you know, they can be intimidating for the students. Do you think that if we were able to award them with NFTs, would that make the educational process more interesting?
Definitely. I mean, if these NFTs that are awarded to them are added to their CV for different tasks that they're doing, then number one, they have the incentive to take part in this because this is their future career. Number two, these NFTs could have some utility as well. We could associate these NFTs, obviously depending upon some scheme, that for every token they receive when they're in our classes or they take part in extra courses, that they can get special time allocated to them on certain resources, on very expensive lab equipment that we have. Or they could, if the university had such facilities, offer them some sort of free gifts or snacks. So there's also utility that we can associate with these types of tokens. And I think on that point, Jonas, as well, it makes me think about when we're giving something back, the university often offers scholarships of sorts, right?
Yes.
And we could come up with, rather than these single chunks of large scholarships, come up with micro scholarships where they're building up their amounts according to the effort that they're doing. And that's something that we can do trivially on the blockchain. We couldn't do this before because it increases the admin overhead exponentially if we were talking about doing this outside of the blockchain.
And how the blockchain would take out the admin, maybe through smart contracts?
That's right. So when we talk about the processing that these blockchains are doing and putting our data on the blockchain and making sure that the lecturer really signed the marks that he's giving to a student, all of that is done on what we call smart contracts. Smart contracts sound like something really hard to wrap our heads around. All they are is code. That's it. All it is code that is doing its job. So I could write a smart contract saying that every time me and Jonas receive, let's say, €1 into our account for some extra lectures we give, automatically I should receive my 50 cents and Jonas should receive his 50 cents. That is the code. Now, what is nice about the smart contract is no one can change the code. It will always do the same thing. So if we were to use these smart contracts in this educational verification process, it will always do that verification process. And this is why we call them contracts, because often they're used in situations where different parties need to make sure that there's some agreed upon action that happens based upon the way we're interacting with these contracts. So that is why they've been termed so, but don't let that discourage you from using them. Eventually, these contracts, smart contracts, will be automating a lot of the processes that we're doing.
In the educational sector, we cannot necessarily talk about contracts, Joshua, because the university is hierarchically higher than the student, right? They do not negotiate, they do not agree on things the students need to comply by university regulations. So we could alternatively call them compliance mechanisms, right? These are digital compliance mechanisms that take out the human element. Something that had to be monitored by administrators now can be executed by code.
That's right.
But and that is fantastic, of course. I mean, first of all, it is extremely efficient for educational institutions because their administrators can now be used in more productive tasks. But also, question, code is powerful. It can automate, it can make it quickly, it can make it more efficient. But what if code fails?
Yeah, that's a big problem. To say the truth, that's the problem that a lot of people promoting this technology do not talk about. So the nice thing about smart contracts is that no one can tamper with them. They will do exactly what they're written to do. They have this guarantee. But if you have a bug or a mistake in these smart contracts, it will do that bug and mistake exactly the way it was written to do. And no one can fix it. No one can tamper with it. So we need to make sure that when we're deploying these systems, that they're correct. And this is where we need to introduce other aspects. We need to introduce levels of assurances to make sure that our code is working correct. Now, this might scare you a bit and say, okay, we're potentially going to use a system that might have bugs and might not allow us to fix those bugs. And well, that's not the case, because there are certain scenarios where we can also get together as a community and choose to update our different software. So we might create university software, and we might encode rules into the system that if Senate or council or whoever governs the university decides to accept certain changes, then it will allow for those changes to be accepted. And coming back to then the issuance of scholarships again, it made me think. Recently, I was filling in a proposal. We were working on together, Jonas, and yes, you can list down your different scholarships, your different funding that you've received, and educational institutions, grants, funding institutions have no real way of verifying whether these are true or not, especially with the tight deadline that they're working on vetting proposals and giving answers back.
Yes.
So can blockchain provide a solution here? Yes, again, the funding agency can notarize onto the blockchain the fact that you received that scholarship and no one else has, and also that you haven't fabricated this funding out of nowhere.
Which again saves a lot of time and effort. I mean, from my experience in EU-funded projects, I remember that in our team we had to employ people that were just doing that. Making sure of the allocation of the funds and reporting back to the commission, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Yes, excellent. And Joshua, we have been talking a lot about the students and how they can benefit. But what about the people that are running the show? What about you and me? Is there any way that blockchain can give incentive to us academics? For example, one of the problems that I have in my mind, and it usually affects not only me, but also the students, is the fact that university rules as they are, they do not give me incentive to write textbooks. But textbooks might be vital for the students, because think about it, if you are a young student, 18, 19-year-old, if the materials that you have available are the huge volumes, detailed volumes, you don't even know where to start from. You don't even know what to read, while a textbook reduces it to the absolutely necessary to what a novice needs. But existing university rules do not many times give us incentive to do that, because textbooks do not count for our promotions. And even if we are altruists, we say, look, I'm going to do it for my students, I'm going to write it, we're not even making money out of it, because chances are that we need to go to a publisher. Not all universities have the opportunity to publish textbooks, so we need to go to a publisher who is going to suck us dry from all monetary compensation that we might have had. Could NFTs be a way to give incentive, for example, to create textbooks?
Definitely. I mean, there's two potential avenues. So one, the university actually should, according to the employment agreements, factor in our efforts towards administration, towards research, and towards education. However, they have a very poor way of incentivizing and monitoring this. Now, if the effort we're doing, if every grade that we're giving is put onto a blockchain, into a system where there's these smart contracts, they could automatically track our efforts and associate with each lecture these effort tokens. And that would be great, because currently the way the system is, they don't even factor this in because they have no way of factoring it in. And yet we're busy all the time in these processes and not getting any reward for it. So that's one first reward that we can look at. And the second one is, when we're contributing to such content that involves an open community or a community of many people, how can we assure that we're, number one, referenced properly, that we're not excluded. So in the case of books, automatic reference and citation generation could be created where all the different chapters are included. Now that's one way, but there's even the monetary incentive. We could come up with systems now where if such books are sold, each contributor gets a cut of the book as soon as it is sold. And not only that, you could even continuously get those cuts if someone resells the book through royalties if you wanted to. So really the thing is, I'm just mentioning hypothetical situations that might make sense or might not make sense, but the thing about this technology is we can achieve whatever we want to achieve with the guarantees that no one can cheat or take this away from you. And I think that is the real beauty of this technology.
So we can mold blockchain to what we want to achieve. And what will blockchain give us in return, Joshua? Probably transparency, immutability, and trust, at least the three basic things that come into my mind.
That's right. Well, I like to say that blockchain is very useful in two particular use cases. One is where you have an institution that is trusted and you are questioning that trust and you want to remove its control. Blockchain is a useful tool there to get rid of that entity with full control. A second use case is if we have a number of individuals who have no way of working together because they don't inherently trust each other, blockchain is a mechanism that can be used as that virtual point of trust, as that trust layer between all the different institutions. So those are the two main use cases, and one that is sort of indirectly coming from them is transparency. So if you think about your educational institution, as academics particularly, the university often makes, or the educational institutions often make decisions, and the transparency of these decisions is nowhere to be seen. It's hidden in Senate and Council. Such systems could allow for the involvement of all individuals involved in such an institution through transparency and blockchain. And to say the truth, this brings us back to democracy in general. In Greece, Greece had, as Jonas, you know, full democracy, direct democracy, where the individuals were involved. And over the years, many said it would be great if we could have direct democracy, whether in our countries and our institutions. And when the internet was posed, people were saying we can now have this. However, people started to realize that they cannot have direct democracy using the internet alone, because there were many points of trust. The person who's providing that computer system can manipulate, and people were questioning voting systems, and we still question voting systems till today. But blockchain, since there is no central point, we can't question whether someone's manipulating our votes. So now we can actually achieve direct democracy in an effortless manner that we could not achieve before. And I think this is great for educational institutions and society in general.
I mean, there is, I think, a very nice example also, and I think at least that is my experience from my own native country. One of the dark sides of running public universities in my country has been the corruption between professors, students, and the such, exactly because of the representative student system. I mean, which is something that does not only appear in universities, it appears in all institutions where representatives are involved. Because again, they are the middlemen. And he who controls the middleman controls the system. It is more or less the same as it happens in the internet. Like he who controls the platform controls the content, right? So in a way, I understand this as removing centralized points of control that could be removed in order to give control back to the community in a more transparent manner.
That's it. And we could even then move towards new types of educational institutions that are not focused around the institution itself, but are focused around all the people that are involved in a particular student's education. So he might have had lecturers from the University of Malta, he might have had lecturers from our other university, or perhaps from an educational institution abroad. And the institution itself doesn't play too much of importance because it's more about the credentials. It's more about the learning experience that the student went through. And by issuing micro-credentials onto a blockchain, we can achieve this new type of agreed upon certificate or diploma or degree amongst all the different universities who want to play part.
This type of transparency and access to somebody's skills, do you think also that might even reduce the need for all kinds of educational products that are now outside? Because, you know, nowadays people are constantly training themselves. It's not like in the old days where you get your degree and that is for life, right? Then you go to work and that is for life. I have in my mind, for example, and I have nothing against it inherently, but all these online platforms that offer courses, Udemy, Coursera, and so forth and so forth. But don't you think that if people are able to see what we have done already, that might reduce the need of hunting down constantly new skills? I mean, I do not say that necessarily people should stop remaining up to date, but on the other hand, what we have on our hands today is absolutely out of control.
Definitely. So ignoring the pedagogical model, what is needed for an actual particular type of education or topic? Let's not get into that, because I imagine there are some topics where you need to study for 3 years consecutively. There are some that you can spread them up. So let's not go into that specifics, but let's talk about in situations where you could spread out education, where it makes sense, we can now achieve this. And this is something that before you would have to register for your first unit or whatever it is, your first course, register for your second course, slowly build up your portfolio, keep track of your degrees, your certificates, whatever. Using blockchain, we get rid of all that. What we can do is allow for lifelong learning, for incremental learning, where along the way, the students, they undertake whatever course, whatever lectures they need to undertake, they undertake any assignments, they get rewarded any exams, and gradually over the life, they're just building up all of these points. And we can come up with new educational models based upon what students actually need, rather than what is easy for the institution to facilitate.
Which was my next question, by the way. And I'm happy that you covered it already, because I indeed agree that it can really allow for a more personalized education.
So I think before we close off, I would like to ask, and we can go on to, let's say, the aspect of blockchain education, which is a bit different than using blockchain in education. Very quickly, I wanted to ask Judith or Natalie, do you have any questions? Feel free to unmute or type in the chat.
Yes, good morning again. I was very happy with what I heard this morning in terms of the security and the micro credentials that are really coming, and how students are moving from university to university to get this stuff, and how the blockchain is going to help. But my mind still goes back to my question of last week, because in the news just this morning, there was espionage concerning an Israeli company with cyberware, you know? So that question keeps plaguing me constantly in terms of security. Now, I know universities have to get away from the paper and pen, or even their own software mentality, because when servers crash, things are lost. When there's a fire, things are lost. And I can see this becoming the potential way for universities. I can see it enacting and making universities more viable. The communication between universities as students move around, I still have a little concern with that, because as students move, ensuring that their material would be with them wherever they go. And I like the idea of the Bitcoin that you talked about, that they will have access to their stuff as well. So they show it, or they, I'm not familiar with all the technological terms, but once they show it, the person who views it can see their material going with them as well. Again, are you going to be having more seminars like this, so as educators, we can talk to our universities and talk with other stakeholders involved to see how best we can get, because my university is located in the Caribbean, and we have students from all over. We have students from Africa. We have students from the Caribbean islands. We have a few from the US who prefer to come to our university. So again, with that, we have to up our game in terms of security and being able to be transparent in so many ways. So I just want to say that I appreciated the 2 sessions that we have had, and at least I can talk something to my university. But my concern still lies with the security aspect of it.
That's right. So in regards to future sessions, I would say it's best to reach out to 3CL and they'll see how to and how to go about it. And when it comes to security, so if we think about more and more systems becoming digitalized, which is the case, over time, most systems will become digitalized. It only makes sense. But the worry is that there's a lot of hackers, there's a lot of spyware, a lot of malware out there. And it's very, for a technologist with the right skills, it's not too difficult. And once you get access to a system, you get access to the data, you can really do what you want to. And this is a big problem because we can be manipulating potentially very powerful people. We can manipulate their past, we can manipulate their grades. So this is actually a solution that blockchain provides. Now, I'm not going to go into how it provides, and this is a bit ironic at this point because you're going to have to build your trust based upon this computer scientists in Malta around the world that it actually does what it's supposed to do. But you can speak to other mathematicians or computer scientists and they should be able to provide you this guarantee. Now, the guarantee is that the data can never be changed. No matter what, no matter how much hard we try, the data in the blockchain cannot be changed. And it is guaranteed through it is guaranteed through spending either a lot of money or through spending a lot of computational power, and not money that your university needs to spend. The network is spending this to guarantee that it can never be manipulated. But don't dwell on that too much. The network guarantees that data cannot be changed. So you could have students incoming with their data already available to you on the blockchain. You could have your students outgoing with their data already available that they cannot change, that the other university cannot change. However, when they are also at a different institution, that university could now say, you know what, the student did really well, here's his grades, here are the teacher's remarks, and you automatically receive that on the blockchain. And similarly, how you and they can't change your data, you can't change anyone else's data. So it's 100% foolproof.
And to put it in the common man's words, just so I think technology aside, what you mean is that the basic advantage of blockchain is its resistance to hacking. Like you can hack digital technologies in general, but blockchain was designed in order not to be hackable. I think for those that have the patience to read through the original Satoshi Nakamoto paper, I think he spends the majority of the time trying to prove why this happens. But one does not need to understand it technically. But indeed, I also understand it that way, that it is almost impossible to dominate a blockchain system and start manipulating it. But Judith, because this is your main concern, and because you made us jealous by mentioning again and again that your university is the Caribbean, you can invite us probably for convincing your university in situ about the advantages.
Indeed. Excellent. Before we close, Natalie, do you have any questions? If not, we can...
Me?
Yep, you can hear you.
Right. Hey, wait. Hold on a minute. Hold on. I was having a little problem in terms of the application with in terms of, currency wise. Not you. That is where I was having a little difficulty, but it was explained somewhat this is new to me, yeah?
That's
The
right.
whole digital thing. And here in Barbados, we have actually decided that we're actually the first country in the metaverse,
Wow, excellent.
Wow.
right? So
Wow.
we're actually looking now at pushing cryptocurrency and blockchain and such like. So I
Excellent.
found it very useful when I got the invitation to jump in, right? But knowledge wise, I'm not there as, I'm not there. But
That's
the
right.
explanations that y'all have been given and the application, I've picked up a lot with that. But last week, I started to get really lost, especially with the drawings and making the connections with the
Yeah.
digital aspect.
Yeah.
Right. But today it's been a much better.
Excellent.
So,
So yeah, sometimes we do get a bit too deep into the technicalities and we try to hold back, but we do have a full master's program and training programs specifically around starting off from the very bottom, building it all the way up. So there's definitely room where we can help out in other aspects and training. But coming back to the metaverse, that is fantastic news. And one great thing that you can do in the metaverse is actually open up a university or open up a place where you can interact with other people.
yes.
This is something we just discussed yesterday at a metaverse NFT conference. So
Whoa.
hopefully, and we could even set up collaborative metaverse interaction places. So this is just the beginning. Thanks a lot for that, Natalie.
Okay, welcome. But I found it very informative.
Excellent, that's great.
Are y'all going to send the recordings?
You'll have to speak to 3CL about that.
To who?
3CL, so the 3CL Foundation who organizes these.
Okay.
I'll let the organizer know and she can reach out then.
Because the section that I'm in at the college is also has a business component. So I find this would be quite useful in the finance section, with the accounts and business and banking measures and programs that they have. So from that aspect, I thought that the recordings would be helpful to share with them.
In fact, Gabriela has her hand up.
Thank you, Joshua. Natalie, yes. So I also sent you a message on the chat with my email address.
I saw it. I'm going to take down the information.
Perfect. So you can drop us an email and we can provide you with the recording, because we do have the recordings in place. We should have at least, but we usually do not put them up. So we can provide you with the recordings on demand though.
Okay, that would be very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How comes, I was wondering, how comes y'all only did these two sessions?
That's for Gabriela.
Thank you for the cue, Joshua. So it was actually a project thought out to be this way for 2 sessions, just to give an idea on the basics behind blockchain. Having said that, if you have any requests, as similarly to what I told to, I believe Natalie, the other participant, please do drop us an email, because obviously if we have requests, we are very happy to provide and make more sessions available, particularly if they are all coming from, say, one particular context, as could be small island developing states in the Caribbean, which seems to be very the case for both of you. So just drop us an email and we'll be more than happy to take it into consideration.
Okay, because one of the things, what I found so useful about this is that our current ambassador to the UAE, he was actually a founding member of a company dealing with cryptocurrency and BitChains, and he is pushing the whole metaverse aspect of it. And we have one of our former prime ministers, his son, he has come back home, and he is also very into blockchain and cryptocurrency and such like. And his company actually then was working with the central bank of the OECD states, and they were the first to start with the digital currency and the like. So that is the way it's going. So I thought that this would have been very useful. So that's why I was saying, with the recordings and thing, and I had hope that, there would have been, like more sessions along that line.
Absolutely. And, we also work a lot with on small states, particularly, and small island developing states. So I can definitely see a lot of synergy between linking up the expertise of Dr. Elul and Dr. Revolides together with this aspect. And I think, we can have some good ideas going. So please send us that email, and we'll take it forward, and, we can have a point of contact then.
Okay. Another thing I was wondering, we're going to get a reflective badge for attending.
Probably in NFT form, right?
Right. This is me just checking in. How are we doing? Are we done?
No, not yet. But if you give us about 15, 20 minutes, we'll be done.
Okay. All right. That's good progress. All right. I'll see you in about 15 minutes then.
Okay.
Didn't anyone respond?
So from an official badge
So
point,
again,
you
They're just gonna call.
okay. I see.
Gabriella I'm not sure if 3CL is providing a badge of some sort.
We usually have certificates provided by the Commonwealth of Learning. So once again, please send us your emails, and we can provide you with the certificates also, because the list of registrations unfortunately doesn't always match up with people that show up for the sessions. So we need to actually have those, we'll send them out to those participants that followed the sessions.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for joining, and I look forward to speaking with you at some point in the future.
Thank you very much, Gabriela, for organizing, and Judith and Natalie for being today with us.
Indeed. Wishing you a nice day, or in Malta, afternoon. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Bye.